If you got a problem, big or small, a mystery to solve and you don't know who to call, take my advice, yes, listen to me. Call Dragon Detective Agency. Hello, my name is Gareth P. Jones. I am the author of this, Dragon Detective Catnapped, and I'm going to read you the first chapter. It's the first in a series of 4 books called Dragon Detective, about a dragon detective. It starts like this, Chapter 1. Dirk Dilly reclined with his feet resting on his desk, watching the smoke curl up from his mouth and fill the room. It spiralled up and then, as it caught a breeze coming through the window, swooped back down. Business was slow. If the truth be told, he wasn't sure how long he'd been sat there. 2 hours? 3? He could turn his head and look at the clock, but it all seemed like so much effort. Anyway, he'd never quite got to grips with telling the time. It was such a peculiar method of measuring things. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. He understood the principle all right. It just seemed like a funny way to chop up time. Dirk listened to the traffic passing and closed his eyes. He felt so relaxed that when the phone rang, harshly breaking the trance he was in, he fell backwards, his long, scaly tail lashing out, knocking the clock clean off the wall. It smashed on the floor. "Rats!" he growled with such force that a small, thin line of fire darted from his mouth. The flame caught the pile of yellowing newspapers that Dirk hadn't quite got round to filing yet, setting them alight. "Big rats!" he said, springing to his feet. He threw the contents of his glass of neat orange squash at the spreading fire. It was woefully inadequate. The fire reached the curtains. Dirk looked around in panic. In the corner of the room was an old fire extinguisher. He whipped out his tail to grab it, but rather than latching on properly, his tail caught the pull cord, immediately setting it off. White foam shot across the room. The extinguisher spun around, covering everything in sight. Everything that was except the fire, which was now blackening the ceiling. "Big fat rats!" There was only one thing for it, the painful option. He flapped his wings a couple of times and lifted himself into the air. Then, wincing in anticipation of the pain, he threw himself against the curtains and ceiling. The whole building shook and Dirk landed heavily on his desk. He lifted his head and looked up. The fire was out. There was a moment's pause before the pain registered. "Ow!" he groaned. His thin, scaly back was fireproof, but he had landed with some force on his soft green underbelly, which was now making an alarming, ringing noise. "I must have hurt myself pretty bad," he muttered worriedly. "What does a ringing belly mean?" Tentatively, he lifted himself up on 4 legs to examine the damage. The ringing grew louder. He took a deep breath and looked down. To his great relief, he found he had been lying on the telephone. He climbed off the desk and sat down behind it, catching his breath before answering. "The Dragon Detective Agency, Dirk Dilly speaking." "Hello, are you a detective?" It was a human child. A girl by the pitch of the voice. "How old are you?" 11. Why? "That's too young. Goodbye." Dirk put the phone down. Kids, he thought. Time wasters. And that was that. Or rather, that would have been that if the phone hadn't started ringing again. In actual fact, that was going to be anything but that. By picking up the phone for the second time, he made sure that that was about as far from that as was humanly or even dragonly possible. "Hello," said the girl's voice again. "What do you want, kid?" he said gruffly. "My cat's been stolen." "I don't do animals." On the other end of the phone there came a strange, gurgling, hiccuping, wailing noise. She was crying. "Listen," said Dirk, a little softness creeping into his voice in spite of himself. But the noise kept coming. "Listen," he said more sternly, but the girl still sobbed. "All right, I'll find your cat." The crying stopped suddenly, and the voice said with surprising brightness, "Great. My address is 43 Elliot Drive. The cat's name is Willow." "And have your parents looked for the cat?" he asked. "I'm not sure they know we have a cat," she replied. "Why do you think it's been stolen?" "Because Willow always comes in when I call her, but she didn't come in tonight." "Tonight? When did you last see her?" "This morning." "So she's been missing for how long?" Dirk glanced at the space on his wall where the clock should have been, then looked down onto where it lay on the floor. He flipped it over with his tail. It had stopped with a big hand pointing at the 6 and the smaller halfway between the 4 and the 5. If he wasn't mistaken, it was 4:30. You're telling me that the cat's been missing for 30 minutes and you've called me? I told you, she always comes when I call her. Hey kiddo, I'm going to put the phone down. Don't call me again. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about thinking about it. If you even think you're thinking about it, you're thinking about, where was I? The girl didn't answer. Instead, the awful noise started again. Growling, growing louder and louder like an air raid siren. Dirk wasn't exactly soft-hearted, and he had no love of humans, let alone their small, annoying offspring, but the noise was so horrible that even if he put the receiver down, the memory of it would linger on. And so, against every molecule of common sense in his large, scaly body, he put the phone back to his long, pointed ear and said, "All right, I'll check it out." "Oh, great," said the girl cheerfully. "My name is Holly, by the way, Holly Bixby." After getting the cat's description, Dirk put the phone down and prepared to leave. It wasn't his usual sort of work. Normally he located lost items, tracked down troublesome teenagers, or took photos of people off work with bad backs who were actually taking trampolining holidays. He slipped his notebook behind his wing and peeked through the slatted blinds. Satisfied that no one was looking, he pulled the cord and opened the window. What could be simpler than a missing cat? It was probably stuck up a tree, or had found a woman next door with full of fat milk, or maybe it had just been run over. No, this would be an easy case. He spread his wings, flapped them a couple of times, and leapt out. And that's the first chapter. If you want to read the second chapter, you'll have to buy the book, I suppose. And there are going to be 3 more books in that series. Thanks for listening.
There are all kind of detectives in this world. You get old ones, young ones, boys and girls. You get any kind of detective that you desire, but there's only one who can breathe fire.
The Dragon Detective, suspected Dragon Detective, is currently coming through the house at the moment. The Dragon Detective is at the door.